Hi everyone, Scorp here. I'm going to do a slightly different video than I usually do. Today I wanted to cover how damage works in Divinity Original Sin 2. Um, and to do that, I wanted to put up the damage equation. And I really wanted to do this just because I've watched several people streaming this game, um, and they're struggling to do damage for one reason or another. And I wanted to put together this little bit of a package here, real quick, just to explain to people how damage actually works in this game. And it is different from like weapon damage versus spell damage. And I wanted to at least point it out and point out how to maximize it, so that I maybe I can minimize the amount of trouble people have when they try to do an honor run and they were just and it's their first time doing something on the higher difficulties, and they don't know how the damage scaling actually works, um, and they don't know the exact way to actually do a ton of damage. So I'm going to start off here. This is the damage equation um, on the screen here. Um, we have base damage here. This is your weapon damage. Um, and each of these terms are going to get multiplied together. So I have these terms across the top: base damage, your basically your elemental bonus. Um, this is a mixture of bonuses, and then um, finally it's your high ground slash crit bonus damage. This one is going to be very large just because you're going to level a bunch of like finesse or strength or intelligence. This can be quite high. This needs to be quite high. And you're going to get this whenever you level and go grab a new weapon. So, base damage, this basically just says go get a new weapon every level. Pretty simple. Uh, I would I would try to get good stats on the weapon, um, because a weapon that is the previous level might actually do more damage, just because it has so much of these other stats. But usually you should be able to find enough of a decent weapon almost everywhere except for maybe Act 3. Act 3 might be the one place where you're stuck without leveling a weapon, although you're probably only going to level like once or twice there anyways, so it shouldn't matter too much. And most of the stuff in Act 3 is actually pretty easy. Um, Elemental bonus. This is going to be this is probably the first thing you're going to level up, because it starts at 0. So this is pretty much one of your biggest things to actually increase your damage. Each point of these increases your damage by 5%. Just straight up 5% damage bonus. Please, please, please do not forget to level these. I'll go into the mathematics of how this equation works in a little bit. But this is a very important thing to put your points into. If you were looking at putting a point into warfare or a point into two-handed, you should almost always put a point into warfare if you're doing physical damage. Same goes with these other four. If you're doing that element damage primarily, like you're a water or you're an air mage, put a bunch of points into Aerotheurge. It will pay off a lot. Same with if you're a pyro mage, put a bunch of points into pyro. Um, and don't put a bunch of points into two-handed to start with, unless you're a battle mage. We can talk about that later. Next up, your attribute bonus. This is your strength, intelligence, and finesse. Um, you're gonna have a really high score in this unless you, for some reason, decided to put a ton of points into Constitution and Memory. Um, but these are gonna be this stat is gonna be huge because of this. Um, it makes everything else in this category actually not matter much. because your attribute bonus is going to be like 200%. So it's going to actually just dominate this category. This is actually one of the problems with weapon damages, is that things like Flesh Sacrifice, Thick of the Fight, Challenge, there are some other buffs like that that I didn't include here. All of that gets lumped into this for weapon damage, along with dual wield, ranged, two-handed, and one-handed. So what that means is that when you put a point into ranged, it's the equivalent of putting a single point into finesse, plus a little bit of a bonus to crit damage. So ranged is one of the last things you want to level on a huntsman. Whereas, because you'll get just as much out of like a point of finesse plus a tiny bit more than that. But finesse, you get way more points to put into your strength, intelligence, and finesse category than you do into the category that dual wield, range, two-handed, and one-handed are in, because they're shared with this, which does a ton of damage, and it's just 1 plus that number. So you're going to get more out of that. Next up, Huntsman and Scoundrel. Over here, so this number is actually going to start relatively relatively high. You start out with a little bit of high ground bonus damage. So Huntsman is not quite as much damage bonus as Warfare. It'll catch up. It'll be your like second stat priority, or Scoundrel. And this is actually one of the main reasons that like a dual wield dagger rogue will do less damage in the late game than a bow user. And it's because Scoundrel exists, but also because Wits exist. And the fact that daggers have a lower base damage than your bows do. The base damage over here is much lower on daggers, but for like the first 3/4 of the game, you're going to crit every single attack. So this number over here really matters. That's why you level Scoundrel so quick. You're going to go Warfare into Scoundrel on daggers. And probably on most characters. But the thing is that ultra late game, when you have enough crit chance that you're getting close to that 100% crit chance on everything that isn't just dual-wield rogue, dual-wield rogue will fall off pretty hard in scaling. That's not to say they're bad. They're pretty good late game. They're just going to do less damage. And just a brief aside, for those of you math folks that understand how equations that look like this work, this is a very similar equation to like if you have a square, or if you have a shape, let's say this is a square, and you have, or a rectangle, and you have a finite number of points, which is how long your perimeter can be. The best way to maximize the area inside of this, which would be basically just multiplying two terms together, would be to make the sides about the same length. So a 4x4 square has a perimeter of 16, whereas a 7x1 rectangle, it also has a perimeter of 16. But one of those has an area of 7, and the other has an area of 16. So you get way more as long as these numbers are close together. That's why when you put a massive amount of points into this, which you're going to have anyways, adding stuff like Thick of the Fight, Flesh Sacrifice, Challenge, and all of these dual-wield range, two-handed, one-handed stats turn into being very minimal gains. Whereas if you were to put all of these points from these stats into like Warfare here, you're going to see a larger gain on your damage. I'm sorry, that was odd. My headset just died for no good reason. Now continuing on, I believe we should be good on all of this. Time to look at spell damage. Spell damage is actually calculated slightly differently, and this is one of the main reasons that like a necro build is actually just absolutely insane in how much damage it does. Your based, I'll focus on the differences. I'll briefly touch. Elemental bonus is the same. High ground and crit damage is the same. Just grab these as quick as you can. And then your base damage. So for spells, base damage isn't based on weapon damage. It is based on basically a level-based damage. So every time you level, you're just going to gain this. You can't alter this. You can't make it better. You can't make it worse. It just is what it is. So a level 20 is going to do more damage than a level 19. Just period. You don't have to upgrade your weapons, which is super convenient. It makes it it makes your mages really cost less in terms of how much gold economy they're going to have to spend over the course of the game, because you don't have to find new weapons every single level. Then elemental bonus, as I said, this is the same. I want to say this column, there are a couple things missing from it at the bottom, and that's miscellaneous bonuses. So each of these is a little bit more useful now. Not much. Strength, intelligence, and finesse are still going to completely dominate this category. And then high ground and crit bonus, this is the same. But miscellaneous bonuses for spells comes out over here. And over here, this is where your actual damage is going to actually be really increased from. If you just put a challenge on an enemy, kill them, and then for the rest of that turn, you have just a straight 20% bonus damage, which is absolutely insane. You can get like 100% damage bonus from Thick of the Fight also. Absolutely ridiculous amount of extra damage. Flesh Sacrifice, you start the game with this as an elf. And this is why, for spell damage characters, elves are the best. Absolutely incredible. The only thing that comes close to it is like a human's ingenious trait, which gives 10% bonus damage here, which is still considerably less than this. But it's useful for like battle mages. I'm gonna go switch over to Divinity real quick, so be right back. Okay, now I jumped over to end the game. So this is an endgame pyromancer and this is an endgame battle mage and an endgame necromancer. These two characters are. So first off, looking at Sabile here. These are lone wolf characters, so they have a little more stats than you might see on a 4-person character, but same principles apply here. I've maxed out intelligence, I've maxed out wits, maxed out my crit chance. My crit chance is basically 100% when I use all of my buffs. My intelligence is quite high. And then on this screen, I focused first on warfare, then I put points into scoundrel. I got other points up to where I needed them to use skills as I was going through here. And then because I'm a lone wolf, and I had a whole bunch of points left over, I had to put points into two-handed and use a two-handed weapon so that I could get the bonus damage from the crit damage that's added from two-handed. That bonus crit damage is super helpful. And because I had this many extra points, I needed to use a two-handed weapon. But this was the last thing that I ended up using. And yes, I would be able to, if I used dual wielding, it's way less good. Two-handed is one of the highest damage of these weapon skills in the game. So that's how I build a Necro. Battle Mage is probably the only odd child out. As usual, maxed out intelligence, maxed out wits. Basically always get your primary stat first, then get wits up to a point where you can actually do the try to get always 100% crit. You can usually do that on Lone Wolf builds. And then after that, you just throw points wherever you need them. Memory is usually pretty useful, so that you can have massive amounts of skills like this. And then over here, so I needed 2 Warfare so that I could use all of my skills. But the main thing with Battle Mage that's a little weird is that it doesn't scale quite well, especially in the early game, because a lot of times in the early game you're not going to get the staff you want. So you're going to end up... what you'd really like to do is you'd like to get a Pyro Staff and use it the whole game, and then cry every single time that there's an enemy that's just immune to fire, which happens way too often. But it would be great if you could just level Pyro. On a Battle Mage, I level 2-handed first, just because I'm going to be using like 4 or 5 different stabs the entire game. So I'm going to be utilizing like I'm going to use a Fire Staff, but as my primary, but a lot of times I have to switch over to like an Air Staff or a Water Staff because something has like 60% resistances to everything else. That just happens way too often. And then I leveled Pyrokinetic next, so that I could go into more of a Pyro build, or more of a Fire Staff build. But knowing that I had to rely on crit damage and 2-handed damage to actually do a lot of my damage for a long time. And it helps that Sparking Swings and Master of Sparks both do Pyro damage, so that's why I leveled Pyro. And then Scoundrel for more crit damage. And I got Savage Sortilege at like level 9 or something, so that I could crit pretty quickly. Or I think it was like 8. So that's my stat priority for like a Battle Mage. If I were a Pyro Mage, it would be Pyrokinetic first. And if I were Lone Wolf, 2-handed would come later. If I were going to go a 2-handed build, I probably would. Most of my Lone Wolf characters end up using 2-handed weapons for the amount of damage bonus 2-handed gives you. So now I think I'm going to just give a little bit of a demonstration of how much damage you can really do. So I will be back in a second once I'm done with this cutscene. Okay, I kind of messed up and I didn't throw Peace of Mind on myself at the start of the fight, so they went first. But otherwise, this is basically the same. So I just used Time Warp to give the turnover to Sabille. Or not. Okay. So I'm not going to have Hothead right now. So we'll just go ahead and fix that. And I already have a Peace of Mind on myself. I had Fane cast that on myself, on Sabille. But this is just going to be a green tea combo. Throw this person in the middle. I probably should have. So I basically used a bunch of buffs. I used Flesh Sacrifice to give myself more damage. I'm putting a challenge on this guy so that when he dies, I do more damage. And then I'm going to do a Bloodstorm here, centered around them. And it's going to do a whole bunch of damage. So my damage jumped from like 9,000 when it hit this guy to 11,000, and that's just because the challenge buff applied, which does a whole 20% extra damage, which is wonderful. Will this hit all of them? Looks like it. So you see I can do like 27,000 damage from a single cast.
I have failed.
So, thanks everybody for watching. I hope this has explained how to do as much damage as possible in Divinity. Thanks everybody for watching, and have a nice day.